It's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I've shown you 5 reasons why you need to get involved in decision making in intensive care. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to share with you why it's none of your business what the intensive care team thinks about you when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Very few situations in life are as challenging and as daunting as having a loved one critically ill in intensive care. There are also very few situations in life that throw you as far outside of your comfort zone as having a loved one critically ill in intensive care. And I'm not talking about a straightforward and overnight admission to intensive care for heart and blood pressure monitoring. I'm talking about challenging, difficult, volatile and heartbreaking situations where a loved one in intensive care is either very unstable and in a very critical condition, or is in a life-threatening situation, or is in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, or your loved one may have a severe or traumatic head or brain injury, or your loved one may be threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order, or your loved one may be in a situation where the intensive care team suggests a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as being quote-unquote in the best interest of your critically ill loved one, or your loved one may even be approaching their end of life in intensive care. Those are the very situations where life has really thrown you a curveball, and those are the situations where you and your family are really challenged, frustrated and anxious. Those are also the situations where most families of critically ill patients in intensive care are at their peak in seeking approval from the intensive care team. Those are the situations where most families of critically ill patients in intensive care think that if they're only nice and approving of what the intensive care team says, that in the end they might get what they want. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, and I will share in a minute why it's the wrong approach. The situations that I just mentioned are also the situations where families of critically ill patients in intensive care basically hand over all of their power to the intensive care team on a platter. Why do I say this? I say this because in more than 15 years intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, I have seen over and over again that families of critically ill patients in intensive care suck up to the intensive care team most of the time without actually knowing and realizing that it's the worst thing they can ever do. 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't have peace of mind, they don't have control, they don't have power, and they don't have any influence whatsoever. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's a situation that is almost homemade, if you will, because families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't think and believe that they can have peace of mind, control, power and influence when their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Families are way too paralyzed by their fear, by their frustrations, by their vulnerability, and they almost always are intimidated by the perceived power and the perceived authority of the intensive care team. That leads families to approval-seeking behavior. I can see it in their body language, and I can hear it in the tone of their voice. It also leads to the intensive care team having all the power, and it leads to the intensive care team not taking you and your family seriously. In essence, they will just treat you like any other approval-seeking family. Now, if you are reading this right now, chances are that your loved one is critically ill in intensive care and is in a difficult, challenging and heartbreaking situation where they are either very unstable and in a very critical condition, or they are in a life-threatening situation. They may be in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays. They may be having a severe or traumatic head or brain injury. or they may be threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order. Or they may be in a situation where the intensive care team suggests a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as being quote-unquote in the best interest of your critically ill loved one. Or your loved one may be approaching the end of life in intensive care. In those situations, you don't really have time for approval-seeking behavior, and in those situations, you can't afford to let the perceived power and the perceived authority of the intensive care team intimidate or even paralyze you. During those difficult, challenging and heartbreaking situations, you need to take control, you need to take charge, and you need to do whatever it takes to get peace of mind, control, power and influence. During those situations, you need to do your own research, you need to stand your ground, you need to stop worrying about what the intensive care team thinks about you and your family. Because it's none of your business what the intensive care team thinks about you and your family. Because the minute you realize that it is none of your business what the intensive care team thinks about you and your family, that's the minute when you can step into your own power. And that's the minute when the intensive care team realizes that they are dealing with a powerful family. It's quite liberating when you have made the paradigm shift that it's none of your business what the intensive care team thinks about you. It removes all your preconceived notions, and it removes all the barriers for you and your family, so that you can finally step into your own power, so that you can have peace of mind, control, power and influence no matter the challenges. If you are a regular reader of this blog, or if you're following my videos regularly, you know by now that the intensive care team more often than not is driving a hidden agenda that is a direct result of what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care. 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care that have no peace of mind, no control, no power and no influence ignore the signs on display that the intensive care team is more often than not focused on managing critically ill patients in intensive care according to their financial budgets. For example, do they think that they make any money or lose money when continuing to treat your critically ill loved one? They're also interested in their bed management interests. For example, do they have many other patients compete for scarce, precious, expensive and in-demand intensive care beds, and therefore they suggest to you and your family that they think a withdrawal of treatment or limitation of treatment is in the best interest of your critically ill loved one in order to free up a bed for the next patient. You also need to bear in mind that there's heaps of politics in intensive care. Therefore, the hierarchy, the big egos of some doctors, the resource limitations, the dynamics, the psychology and the intrigue in such a volatile environment like intensive care are almost always impacting on how the intensive care team positions your critically ill loved one's prognosis, diagnosis and also their treatment. And the list could go on here. The bottom line is that if you don't stop seeking approval towards the intensive care team, and if you don't stop worrying about what the intensive care team thinks about you and your family, you will be doomed. Start doing your own research instead and start challenging the intensive care team's assumptions. Start following your own feelings and intuitions and stop putting the intensive care team on a pedestal. The fact of the matter is that if you keep doing what 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care are doing, who have no peace of mind, no control, no power and no influence, you will get what those 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care are getting. Instead, focus on the things you can control, keep doing your own research, stand your ground, challenge the intensive care team's assumption, and the intensive care team will immediately realize that they are dealing with a powerful family who is prepared to do whatever it takes in order to have peace of mind, control, power and influence. So, how can you stop worrying what the intensive care team thinks about you, and how can you do your own research and quickly get peace of mind, control, power and influence while your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Well, you get to that all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You will get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You will get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section where I answer your questions, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Also check out our product section where you get more ebooks, videos and audio recordings, and where you can also get one-on-one consulting with me. Just click on the consulting section on our product section where you can book some one-on-one consulting with me via Skype or over the phone. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update or in one of our consulting sessions. Thank you.